So let's be very clear that the reforms that we have instituted over the last few years has led to the lowest crime rate in 50 years and the lowest prison population in 20 years. That's not a bad place to start. Today's conference could not come at a more critical time in our nation's conversation about criminal justice reform. We have accomplished much as a state, but it's time now to consider where we go from here. Earlier this week, we learned that Connecticut has experienced the second largest drop in violent crime in the nation. We experienced an 8.5% drop in violent crime in 2015, which builds upon significant reductions in 2014 and 2013. With respect to 2014, our drop was 2.5 times the national average drop in violent crime. And of course, on a national basis, violent crime this past year went up 3.8%, making our statistics even more important. In fact, since 2010, violent crime in Connecticut has been reduced by 22%, and our total number of index crimes reported in 2015 was at its lowest since 1967, when the population of the state of Connecticut was substantially smaller than it is today. Together, we are taking a different approach in Connecticut, and it is working. We are focusing on risky and dangerous individuals. We're focused on taking those individuals off our streets. We are cracking down on crimes involving illegal guns that have led to soaring murder rates in other American cities. And at the same time, we are severing the school-to-prison pipeline, focusing on reentry and creating a clear path to pardons for nonviolent offenders. And I see another of my colleagues, great colleague, in the room as well. As a result of these efforts, our prison population has plummeted along with our crime rate. As was just pointed out to you, we recently announced that our statewide inmate population dropped below 15,000 for the first time since January 3rd, 1997. The population is down, as was stated, nearly 25% from its all-time high of 19,893. Those reductions have allowed us to continue to close prison sections and prisons, as we have needed less room to house the prison population. We have also been able to responsibly reduce the Department of Corrections budget substantially over the last few years. Connecticut is leading the way nationally in reforming the criminal justice system, reforms that are reducing crime while changing the lives of families and of communities. And our residents are safer than they have been in 2 generations. Each year there are fewer and fewer victims of crimes, especially violent crime. We are also seeing our reform efforts work for a most critical population, our young people. The number of inmates aged 18 to 21 is down 54% since July of 2009. This is according to a newly released information from our Department of Corrections system. In 2009, there were more than 2,000 inmates in that age group. Now, just imagine, 2,000 inmates between the ages of 18 and 21. Today, that number is less than 900. At the same time, we are also seeing a similar drop in arrests for the very same age group of young adults. And for those inmates under the age of 18, we have seen a population drop from 332 in 2009 to 76 in 2017. Meanwhile, well, let me just stop there, because I want to point how important this is. We survey our older population, and the percentage of our older population that was first incarcerated in these younger years is about 75%. So if you take the numbers of reduction in this youth group and apply that over the future, it means we will continue to have a declining, should mean that we will continue to have a declining prison population. And remind you, it costs us about $168 a day to put somebody up at our hotel. And then, of course, there are many other societal reasons to do the right thing, not the least of which is we're seeing lower recidivism and lower crime rates. These decreases can be largely attributed to raising the age of juvenile offenders in our state to 18, which took full effect on July of 2012, and the school-based diversionary programs that we have also instituted since that time. Let me just share with you that I was under tremendous pressure in 2011, as soon as I was sworn in and even before, to delay or try to sidetrack the system going to age 18. We wouldn't bend and we wouldn't buckle, and it was the right thing to do, and it has proven itself very swiftly to have been the right thing to do. It was not passed under my administration, but we implemented it, and we're very proud of it. It is clear that previous raise the age efforts were a success, and that's why last year I proposed going further. It's time for our society and our state to treat young offenders over 18, but under 25 years of age, as what they are, a unique group within our system that presents great challenges and great opportunities. We know that we cannot treat them just like they would be if they were 15, 16, or 17-year-olds, and we know that we shouldn't treat them as full adults. And it's based on scientific data and studies. We have an opportunity to intervene in their lives now before they embark on a life of crime. Last year I proposed that we take a different approach to this population, and I still believe that we must do so in order to reduce crime and reduce our prison population even further. The residents of this state are safer today than they have been in 50 years. Each year there are fewer and fewer victims of crime, in particular violent crime. We have accomplished what some thought impossible: safer streets through a lower crime rate while reducing the number of people in prison, therefore saving taxpayers money. And again, I remind you, it costs $168 to stay at our hotel. Much of this change has come because as a state we have refocused on preventing violent crime while we also work to provide second chances. Last year we implemented the 2015 Second Chance Society Bill. The Legislative Office of Fiscal Analysis predicted at the time that we proposed that legislation that it would reduce our prison population by 1,120 offenders because of that bill and that implementation. But last year we know that we have exceeded that prediction, and the inmate population fell by more than 1,130 offenders and continues to drop as we speak. Part of that legislation changed the penalty for drug possession, and I think this is extremely important, from an unclassified 7-year felony to a Class A misdemeanor with a maximum 1-year jail term. Under the old law, there had been a mandatory 2-year prison sentence for many possession-only violations. And that was particularly true in almost the entirety of our urban cities. So New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport, you'd have to look for a place that you would not be exposed to that minimum sentence of 2 years. And I, quite frankly, was very concerned about the racial disparity that caused in our prison population. The result of the number of people in prison for drug possession, the results are that population has fallen by 43%. These are people usually, more often than not, with substance use disorder, mental illness, frequently suffering from depression or anxiety, and engaged in self-medication. And they are not, by and large, violent offenders. Arrest among these people, young people, continue their rapid decline. So in 2015, 65% fewer 17-year-olds were arrested compared to 2008. Thanks to the 2015 bill, our Board of Pardons and Paroles has officially launched our expedited pardons process. That process will help nonviolent offenders who have paid their debt to society to get work, find housing, and even get a college loan without their past mistakes forever increasing the likelihood of future mistakes. What I have frequently said, and some of you have heard me say this before, we need to be more invested in permanent reformation than we are permanent punishment. The process will help nonviolent offenders who have paid their debt to, as I said, get back to work and pay their own bills. Under the leadership of Commissioner Scott Semple, our Department of Corrections is leading the country with its focus on reentry. He described some of those efforts. Over the past 18 months, the Department of Corrections has created 4 reintegration centers, 3 at Cybulski and 1 at the Women's Facility at York. These units are preparing offenders to re-enter society, working through the issues that brought them to prison in the first place. One of the, I think, most exciting of those is one that was designed specifically for people who had served in the military, in essence reminding them perhaps of their finest moments when they were at their best, and urging them to return to that point in their lives. These units, as I said, are getting people ready to come back out, and I believe in early analysis have demonstrated that they are contributing to a lower recidivism rate as well. But where do we go from here with 15,000 men and women still incarcerated in our state and our urban communities still experiencing levels of violent crime and incarceration that are far too high? What else can we do? Jurisdictions around the country are looking at the damaging effects of pretrial incarceration and making important changes. I urge that our state do the same. It is too easy for high-risk offenders to get out of jail pre-trial if they have access to cash and a bail bondsman on a speed dial. But poor people are remaining in jail in our own state on very low bail simply because they can't make that low bail. We pulled statistics on one given day. We had somebody who was in jail for $1. We had people who were in jail for a cash alternative of less than $500 in many cases, about 360 people with very low bail in prison on the day that we pulled those numbers. It's a problem that we should fix. You should not be incarcerated because you're poor. There's a reason to have a system to protect society. We should use that system to protect society, but one of the things that we should measure it on is not poverty. States like Alaska, Indiana, New Jersey, New Mexico, Kentucky, and the District of Columbia have all changed their pretrial justice systems to focus on risk rather than financial resources, and I urge our state to do that. Right now, our Connecticut Sentencing Commission is examining the system used in many of these states, and I look forward to their findings and their recommendations. I want to commend Judge Carroll, who I thought was going to be here, but I haven't seen him yet, unless he's way up there, for the work that he's doing in this regard. But we must move forward. We must move towards a system that keeps dangerous people in jail without significantly damaging the lives of many individuals who sit in jail on a pretrial basis and are there simply because of their poverty. Ultimately, these efforts are and will continue to make our communities safer and will make for a brighter tomorrow in Connecticut. It will allow more people to get back to work sooner and to have useful lives in our society. And that should be our goal. It is, in fact, our critical task. Thanks.
I know you mentioned that you were in a process of developing a correctional facility for mental health offenders. How would that look?
Well, what was referenced by Scott was in our reentry units, getting people ready to come back into society, that we're talking about developing one specifically for people who have had diagnosed mental illness currently or in their past. To make sure that they're hopefully have the best level of control over their circumstances, that they are ready to receive the medications once they're released, that they need to be released, that they have the opportunity to discuss those challenges on an ongoing basis in the weeks and months before they're released to a broader society. We want somebody to be on top of their problem to the greatest extent possible. So it's a reentry situation.
Yes, sir.
One of the problems that a number of my clients have after they get out is employment. And specifically, something they could have done prior to getting their felony record, now they're prohibited because of their felony record, because of the employer, or in some cases, the employer may even be a state of Connecticut. What's being done about that?
Well, we're doing a number of things, not the least of which, I shouldn't say not the least of which, one of the most important of which is to make sure that everyone understands when they're eligible for a pardon, and that we're giving appropriate folks those pardons so they can clear their records, so that if there is a legal impediment to their being employed, we can remove that impediment. And so the pardons and parole process is in fact being changed to accommodate that. I think some folks are going to permanently suffer, particularly violent offenders. They're going to be tough to place. Now, there are people and organizations that are willing to employ those folks. We need to expand that to the greatest extent. What I frequently say when I speak in urban areas, if we're good enough to sell to, then we're good enough to employ. And I think that's a message that has to be reinforced on an ongoing basis. So I think creating additional opportunities, and quite frankly, creating a society that is more open to giving those folks those chances is going to be very important. And we have done things to make it easier for people to rise in the employment process without being impeded immediately because of their record. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be hired, because it may be a valid point of consideration for jobs. What we don't want to see is everyone automatically knocked out because they have some past, perhaps distant or perhaps not major, that otherwise, by simply saying, yes, I've been arrested or I've been convicted, might otherwise mean that they would not even rise to the process where somebody might actually consider them as a candidate. I was at a building yesterday, a program, Open Hearth in Hartford, which, by the way, is they're under contract with the Department of Corrections for 42 beds on a halfway house basis. They provide housing, but they also provide training. They help people develop resumes. They have a specific program in aerospace. They place the folks who go through that program. And there's a relationship between themselves and one of the colleges in the area to train people for aerospace jobs. So I think that system will build itself out as we change society's minds and as we convince more people it's in their best interest to be supportive of permanent reformation. Yeah.
I have a question. So I would like to first shout myself out, being formerly incarcerated, a violent offender with 2 master's degrees, and there's a lot of us out here that people don't know about. So my question is focused around education, particularly the younger adults that are inside. What are your plans, and is there any kind of evaluation as far as educational opportunities or programming to prove that?
Sure.
Would you repeat the question, Governor?
Yes. The person recounted that she had her own difficulties in the criminal justice system, but has gone on to get 2 master's degrees and is wondering what we would do with respect to younger offenders. Well, first of all, we're arresting fewer younger people, which I think is a good thing. We're in one step alone with respect to decriminalizing marijuana. It's meant that we've decreased the number of people coming into our system, which allows our prosecutors, and our chief prosecutor is here, to concentrate on the violent offenses as well. And we have a big program to head off this, what we call high school to prison population very effectively, because, and I've given you the numbers, but we have learned that particularly disproportionately in our urban areas, but not exclusively in our urban areas, young black men and young Hispanic men are more likely to be suspended and suspended for things that other people aren't suspended for. That suspension quickly breaks down the educative process, damages the educative process, and we want to head that off as well. If you fall 14 days behind in school or 7 days behind in school, you don't necessarily make that up in the remaining days of a 183-day school year. In all of the things that we've done, even under a tight budget, we have made more housing available and more job training available. We are working with more employers than ever before, and we're pushing all of those fronts.
A question up above.
Okay.
Governor, I have a question.
Oh, there, okay.
Hi. I'm standing here so you can see us, and he's got a question up here as well, so I just don't want you to miss that as well. But
Now, did they do something wrong that they had to sit up here?
That's a timeout.
no, we did something right. One thing that I think hasn't come up a lot, may not be part of the conversation today, but I'm sure you're aware of it, is mental health in our criminal justice system. I know that there have been a lot of cuts to DMIS because of the budget issues, and that has affected in some ways programs that inmates or defendants that we represent can be let out to. And this I'm talking more about pre-trial and during the adjudicated process, not post-conviction. Is there any concern that there's going to be a pressure to sort of put these people in jail because there are no resources available pre-trial to them, and how might that impact what the great work that you guys have been doing in reducing our prison population? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think statistics show 25, 30, 40% of people in the criminal justice system have mental health issues, and resources are very scarce for that.
Yeah, I suspect it's substantially higher than 25%, quite frankly. And I think all of the budget reductions that we've had to make in various systems are difficult to make, and not ones that we do without great concern. I will also say that I think through this process, we also have tried to be mindful of those programs that work and those programs that don't work, those interventions that work and those interventions that don't work. I think if you think of state government usually funds whatever it funded in the past regardless of results. And what we are trying to push ourselves to do is to make sure that we don't do that anymore, and that we are actually results-based in our analysis of how we spend our dollars. So there's really two things happening. Shrinking revenue has caused us to expend less money, but we're trying to do it in a way that we're actually measuring results. It's also pushed us to do things in other areas. 90% of our disabled population that is living in a facility that's run by a not-for-profit or community provider. 10% remains with us, but their treatment is far more expensive. And so in a tight budget, what you look at is, listen, if we can provide service to more people working with not-for-profit and community providers, and that's a better way to do it as well. All of which is to say it's not easy, and yes, there's a concern, and yes, we monitor it on an ongoing basis. And to the extent that revenue will allow us to expand working programs, we'll do that in the future as well. But I will also say to you that within the budget we have, within the budget that we're currently operating in, we did commit certain sums of money to job training, to mental health, and to housing, and we'll continue to do that.